Alright guys, I got another tutorial for you today. Today, we're going to be learning how to install Starrod Classic. Now, if you've ever been curious about Paper Mario modding, the one important thing you're going to need to know about Paper Mario modding is that you're going to need at least one version of Starrod to do it. For beginners, I'd personally recommend Starrod Classic as it's the only one I've actually used, but in the future I wouldn't mind learning how to use the most recent version, which would be the decompilation of it. But for now, we're just going to download Classic. As of recording, the latest release would be 0.5.9, which I have downloaded right here. Another thing you're going to need to know is that you want to make sure you have Java installed on your computer. I'd assume that most people would probably have Java installed already, and there's this very specific version of Java that you'll need to actually get this to run, because not every version of Java will work with Starrod. But if you have the right version, if you click on Starrod right here, it'll ask for a new config. So we're just going to create a new folder real quick. We'll just call it New Project, for lack of a better term. So yeah, we're going to select our new project folder. Cannot find mod config, you can create one. Now you have to find a Paper Mario ROM. It needs to be a US copy of the game. Obviously you'll have to provide your own, so make sure you properly get a hold of a US copy of the game. Anyways, once that's done, it'll open up Starrod like this. Depending on what version you have, it'll look a little something like this. I can quickly go over some of the features it has. The first thing you're going to want to look at, obviously, is the mod manager, and you're going to want to dump the ROM assets. I already have assets dumped, and I don't want to risk overwriting my current project, but just make sure you do that, and then you'll want to copy those assets to your mod. So just hit yes on that. It'll take a little bit to actually dump all of it, but if you do all that, you should be able to use the dumped vanilla assets with your project that you're working on. Now, let's say you've actually done some work in Paper Mario already and you want to, test out your mod. The easiest thing to do would be to hit compile mod. And when you do that, it'll actually make a project for you that you can test out. One thing you can do here is you can check what you actually want to dump. You could just select dump everything, which will give you everything to look at in the game. You could change some options here, like recompress map data. Not too sure what the difference is between the recompressed versions and the non-compressed ones. Use tabs for indentation, use tabs for spacing. This will be stuff more for like when you're editing in like Notepad or whatever editing program you use. Put open brace on new line. These are like mostly cosmetic things. Personally, I like to just leave it on default. As for the options, I'm gonna open up my version of Starrod just to show. If you have dumped all of your assets and you go to options, there's a bunch of other things you can check here. You're gonna want to enable all of these depending on what you're doing. If you're using custom textures, you'll want to enable this. If you're using custom backgrounds, you'll also want to modify this. Do this if you have custom sprites, custom fonts, and custom audio/music. Properties, you can name your mod. This is the map that you'll start the game on upon selecting a new save file, and the entry that you enter from. These are a bit more complicated, more advanced stuff right here. So allowing 10 partners, it'll allow Goombaria and Goomba to be selectable. This is I think this is more if you're adding like custom party members. If you want to have like, extra party members besides the main 8, you can do that. Increase heap size, you'll want to leave that. That'll make it so that you can fit more stuff into the hack. Compress mod package, you can fit more stuff as well. A lot of these are good for just like saving up space and like getting rid of a bunch of junk data that you won't need. Skip the intro logo is good if you want the game to boot quicker. Disable demo reel. It'll prevent that little it's like showing a bunch of like demos basically where Mario's doing stuff in the game. If you don't want to show those, most hacks usually disable it because the demo reels are kind of weird anyways, because they have like completely different data from the rest of the game. Disable intro story, that disables the, like, today I'll be telling you about the Star Spirits thing, that disables that, so that doesn't play on startup. Allow conflicting patches. Sometimes can be good, it just depends on what patches you have for your hack. Mine does have conflicting patches, so I like to leave it enabled. I'm not too sure what duplicate sprite names is, but I have it enabled anyways. Now, debug, this is something that a lot of new people tend to overlook when starting out hacking. So debug information. So debug information essentially gives you like God mode, basically. You can do a lot of things with it, like you can save anywhere, you can set your story sequence, you can give yourself infinite HP, a lot of that stuff. It's good for testing out your hack without having to play it normally. Variable logging will basically tell you, well, it says right here, it prints a message whenever a game byte is written. So let's say you collect a mushroom from a block. It'll say like mushroom obtained, basically, and it'll make sure to let you know that key has been written to the game, essentially. Quick launch is also pretty good. It'll just skip past the title screen and it'll go straight to like where you last saved. You don't want to enable this when you're actually getting other people to play this. This is more of a testing thing. Debug battle, basically whenever you want to get into a battle really quickly, you can have it set to this, so that when you want to get into a battle, it just loads this battle pretty easily. That's all of the build options for Starrod. Next up, we have the Globals Editor. The Globals Editor is basically where all of the items in the game are stored, along with your moves, a lot of the game's like image files and HUD elements and all that stuff. So if you want to add new items or modify existing items, this is where you'd want to go to do it. Strings Editor is where you can modify the text in the game. So this is where you're going to be adding all of your text. And the great thing about the text editor is it has all of the options as well. So if you want to make a new dialog box, you can make it do style right, and then you say, this is a test message. And then if you want to end the message, you do wait, end. And that'll be your message right there. If you want to add more than that, you want to hit Shift and Enter to make a BR, or a line break, and then you want to do wait, next. And then you do another message, so message 2. And then you do wait and end. And that will be your text box. And you can do a lot of different things with this, like you can add different effects, like you can have the text wave, like this. And this is where the game will call all the different like types of text that you can do. You can also do things like change the text position. You can have it type in variables and like other things. You can even have different voices with varying degrees of success. I've gotten some of this to work. You could just have it display a random image in the text box if you really want. So you can have lots of stuff like that. Anyways, next up we have the level editor. The level editor is where you add new maps. Now, this is not actually a map editor. This is basically where you add like data for new maps. So like, I don't know, let's say you want to add a third map to Dry Outpost, right? This is where you'll do it. So if you want to do that, you'll want to go to add new map, and then you can add a new map from here and call it like DRO03 or something, and that'll be the new Dry Outpost map. Similarly, if you want to add new stages, you can come over to something like Mount Rugged, and you can add a new stage, and stages are the internal name for basically battle backgrounds and the stuff that Mario fights on. Resources is basically the textures in the game. All the textures are stored here, including some of the other things like the backgrounds and the different partner like images when you get a new partner. That's where all of this stuff gets stored. Anyways, next up we actually have the proper map editor. So just as an easy way to look, we're going to open the first map in the game. Alright, so here is the map. Now obviously my map will look a bit different from yours since I'm just using my previously dumped game and my project that I've been working on. Quick little overview of the map editor. You can see all of your models on the side here. You can also check out the colliders, which is a fancy way of saying the collision of the game. Zones control the camera, and markers are your NPCs, exits, and items and stuff that you can find on the map. One thing you can do is you have 3 different views of the way you can look at the map. You can also enable the graphics by pressing the T key, I found out recently. One thing that's very helpful is if you don't like having these 4 views, what I like to do is go to this view right here and press F, and it'll zoom it in. And you can control this by using WASD and Shift. So you can control the map and you can move through the map and make it very easy to get to where you need to be when you want to edit the map. You can also use the F keys to disable things. So F1 disables all of the graphics, F2 disables the collision markers, F3 disables the zone markers, and F4 disables the entity markers, so like the panel and the exit, for example. Now, very commonly in maps, for those who don't know, you'll commonly see a bunch of NPCs stored below the maps. So most times, the game will store every NPC that is not needed at all times at the -1000 units. This is good because if you don't need an NPC to be loaded into the scene, they'll just be stored way beneath the map, and then you can call them above the map to where Mario is, or if you want to have them walk off screen and then enter the scene from that way, basically. Another thing you can do is you can just look at all the textures that you have. One thing you can do is, like, say you don't like these grass textures, right? You can grab them and you can apply a different texture by pressing the right key. So if you really want to have the grass look like pipes, you can do that by pressing right click, or you could have it be space. You could have a space like ground, basically. So you can do all kinds of things, and it'll look a little weird if you do it on something else, like, you know, a bush. Like, well, where'd that bush go? Now it's just a bunch of stars. How weird, right? You can also change what the graphics will look like. So for example, you have alpha test. If it's like a PNG instead of like a JPEG, you can make it show up like this. Otherwise, if you do it like as surface, it'll show up weird in the game, and there'll be like harder edges, or it'll just be like no PNG at all. It'll look really weird, obviously. Another thing you can do is you can paint. So a lot of the graphics in this game, they'll start out as white textures, and the devs went in and manually repainted all of them. So for example, we have this bush here, and it's all green and stuff. So maybe you want, like, I don't know, a blue bush, so you can paint it blue and it'll turn blue like that. And it's very good for those textures that are like all white and you want to recolor them to actually be something nicer. You can also do things like, you know, make things more transparent. So if you want a transparent blue bush, then you can do that too. But you have to set it to the right thing. If it's surface OPA, there will be no transparency at all. So you want to set it to something like XLU no ZB or whatever. Stuff like that. It'll show up more transparent in-game. That's a little overview of the map editor. Maybe I'll go in more in-depth in the future, but that's just an example of what you can do for now. Alright, back to Star Rock. The next thing we can do is we can have a look at the sprite editor. So this is where it'll store all of your party members, Mario's sprites. Obviously, it's using the sprites that I've been working on with my project. But when you start up, it'll display everything as it is in vanilla, so you'll have like Blue Goombario and stuff. Pretty cool things you can do here is you can obviously edit the palette of everything. That's like one of the first things I did. You can have a look at their animations, and you can actually edit like what rasters they use. Rasters is basically a fancy way of saying the sprites that every character in the game uses. So I don't know, let's say like you want Goombario to be like constantly surprised. You could have him set to always have his mouth open if you want, or whatever. You can add new palettes with the edit palette list. So if you want an NPC to have more than, you know, their default, you can do that. You can edit the raster list. You can add new rasters this way. The easiest way to do that would be to actually open the folder that the NPC is stored in. Well, actually, why don't we have a look at that real quick? So if you go into your folder, you can go to Sprite, you can go to NPC, and you can go to the ID of the NPC. So we can go to Goombario over here, and here's all the rasters that he has. So what you can do then is you can open this XML sprite sheet, and if you open that up, you can look at the list of rasters and palettes. And if you want to add a new one, usually what I do is just make a new line, and then you name it the next ID in line. So it'll be raster 1B, for example. It's a good example of things you can do as well. You can also do some other things, like you can show the in-game filtering. You can choose to have the background on or not. You can flip them horizontally so they can face a different direction. You can add new animations as well if you really want. That's always nice to have. I'm not going to save that though because I was just demonstrating. So next up, we have the image editor. This is where you can add new textures and new rasters. This is basically Starrod's in-engine editor, essentially. So here you can... My mouse is a little off because my scaling is a little weird, but it'll look probably more normal on everybody else's end. So yeah, you get a little... You can choose to have the grid on or off. I usually don't like to have the grid because I find it kind of distracting. But, you know, you can add new things. So, like, you know, you want to give, like, Goombarius a little nose here or something, you can do that. Press Ctrl-Z to undo it. There is like a controls thing here if you really want to look at it. I usually don't do most of these. I usually just do it all manually because that's kind of how I'm used to, but you can zoom in with mouse wheel, you can pan with the WASD, and this is generally how you can add new sprites and stuff pretty easily. Or you can use an external sprite program. I know a lot of people use Aseprite, I think it's called. That's a pretty good one from what I've heard, but I don't use that. I usually just use it in GIMP. GIMP's good enough for me, but whatever works for everybody else. So next up, we have the world map editor. There's not too much you can do with the world map editor. Like, I guess you can move the paths around, and I think this is more like if you're making a custom map for your hack. I'm just using the vanilla map, but I'm recoloring it over time when I feel like it. You can move the paths around, I guess. Like, whoa, look, you can move the path for, you know, Toad Town and stuff. There's not too much. I actually have barely even touched the world map editor. I don't think I've ever used it. And lastly, we have themes. So if you don't like the ugly white that Starrod comes with, you can set it to something nicer. Like I use dark purple. I like dark purple. I think it's a nice, easy on the eyes color personally. Yeah, that's a good overview of Starrod, I think. But maybe in the future I'll make more in-depth tutorials. Like, I haven't even gone over how to make new enemies yet, or modify stats and stuff. So that could be another tutorial if you guys be interested in seeing that. I think that'll be it for Starrod then. If you guys liked what you saw, if you guys enjoyed this tutorial, if you thought it was helpful, I'd recommend you check out my ROM hack that I've been working on called Paper Mario Down Bad Edition. I've been working on it for a year now. I put a lot of effort into it, and, you know, I'd be really appreciative if more people would check it out, because I like seeing people play my stuff. It's pretty fun just seeing people's reactions. Maybe we can make it blow up or something. With that being said, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and Twitch, and I will see you guys for another tutorial in the future. Potentially more tutorials on Starrod, or tutorials on other things. So, see you guys then.